declining resource base for local government. And what's your reflection on that? Because there's academics who study governments and local government and all that, and they have lots of ideas about the idea of local government crisis or state crisis and so on. So if you keep reducing the resource base, or else the idea is that there's demand always exceeds the capacity of local government to deliver and so on in resource terms, and we do know that fiscally there's just been this very great downward pressure in the UK on the amount of resources that goes to local government. I mean, how do you kind of absorb that, and what's your sense of whether or not there is an underlying crisis, or whether or not people just get on with the job at hand? It's hard to make sense of that from the outside. So I wonder what your perspective from the person leading a lot of the processes has been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's as strong as crisis, but it can't be far from it. And I think the problem is that every single year, every council does just get on with it in some shape or form, and sucks up the joy that's handed to us in terms of a settlement, and figures out how to work around it. And we've done that for, well, certainly since ever. I've been a councillor. I first got elected in 2007, and we had a few years where the budget discussions about how do we spend this extra £2.5 million we've got, because we got a bit more than we were expecting. But the last 8-10 more years, every year has been a cut of some kind in real terms. Yeah. And especially this year, we took a draft budget through council last week. We're £46 million short of a balanced budget over the next year and a half. And we're doing it over a year and a half because we can't possibly make the savings we have to make to cover all the COVID costs in this year. So we're spreading it over 18 months. And that's going to be really difficult, because the reality of what councils do is that education, which is 54 or 55% of our budget, is effectively locked because the government won't let us close schools. We've got 171 of the blessed things, and there's about 30 of them with less than 20 pupils in them, but we're not allowed to close them. And that's just ridiculous, but we're not allowed to do it. There's a pupil-teacher ratio that's locked in with the unions. There's a class size that's locked in with the unions. Education is pretty well stuck there, and yet it's 54% of the budget. You then go to the IJB, Health and Social Care, it's effectively ring-fenced as well, and probably their demand is... So then you take all those big things out of the equation. When you get a budget cut, you're cutting maybe 30% of the budget. So a 10% cut in a £600 million budget is hard, but when you're taking £60 million out of the £250 million, that is really, really challenging. Yeah. And it's always the same things that we end up looking at for budget savings. It's no different this year. Yeah. You're going after your roads maintenance budget, you're going after your landscape services stuff, and those are the things that people complain about the most, because there's potholes in the roads, the grass isn't getting cut in the cemeteries. We get absolute hell this year because we stopped grass cutting for about 3 months, and you don't cut your grass for 3 months, it doesn't look great, and then there's a hell of a job catching up. So the services that we have the ability to take money out of are the ones that people actually notice the most and complain about the most. So the answer is that we have to get somehow more money out of the system, or they have to take stuff. The council has to stop doing stuff, and that's, I think, where we're heading. We're probably going to have to, somehow come up with a list of things that we just have to stop doing because we can't afford to do it anymore, and hope that somebody else will pick up the slack. Things like grass cutting in our towns and villages. We might just say, sorry, if you want a tiny village, you're going to have to do it yourselves. And then, of course, that opens a whole can of worms about public liability. And if a couple of village worthies, as they do already, in many cases, are out cutting the grass and their strimmer throws a stone up and chips somebody's windscreen, who gets sued? So it becomes very complicated very quickly when the council stop doing things. And that's the problem, I think, is for decades the council has been doing virtually everything for everybody. And we haven't been doing that for ages, and that's going to get worse and worse and worse. Because, I say, we're £46 million short and there's none of it is going to get fixed easily, and every council's in the same boat.
A bit of what you're saying sounds like there's a sort of feeling of deja vu that you get every year when you have to engage in these.
It is, absolutely, yeah. And every year we start the budget process saying, well, last year's process was hopeless. We didn't reach decisions fast enough. We didn't make the big decisions about things that we have to stop doing. But we'll do it differently this year. So we come up with a different way of having the same discussions. And after that year, we say that was terrible. We have to think of a different way of doing it next year, because there's no easy way of doing this.
Yes.
That's and we spend most of our discussions talking about the stuff that actually doesn't make a huge difference in terms of money. So 7 to 8 years ago, we got rid of our caravan parks. The council used to run half a dozen caravan parks. We must have spent more time talking about the £60,000 that we spent running caravan parks than the education budget of 340 million quid or something. This year it was bedding plants. We supply our communities with free bedding plants in the spring. 150 grand or something it costs us to do that. We spend more time talking about that than anything else in the budget. And I've been anything else. Because everybody understands it. Yes. They understand what bedding plants are.
Aye.
They've got some, they've seen some, they've been to the garden centre.
Yes. Well, that's been so interesting. Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Gifford. I'm conscious of your time, but you've been very, very generous with your availability, and thanks for being so thoughtful and reflective with me today.
Absolutely delighted to do it. I mean, if we get anything out of this last 9 months of horrendous stuff, it's lessons learned on how we can do it better next time.
Yeah, I completely agree. So thanks very much for entering into this conversation in that spirit. It's been a pleasure to meet with you as well. So stay safe. Thanks for your time.
Very good.
And the EIS will be in touch to disseminate it once there is a report in the new year. But thanks a million for that. Great.
Nope. You're very welcome.
Great. Have a good day ahead. Cheers for now. Enjoy the nice weather.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
You too.
Thank you. Bye bye.